No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 195. I've got to start today, by the way, with an apology to those of you who may have been sucked in by my April Fool's Day joke earlier, which actually went a little bit better than I was expecting. I guess it shows the madness of Britain today, however, that so many high-profile folk actually believed it when I posted on X. This is absolutely insane. Sadiq Khan's TfL is planning to permanently change the name of London's Whitechapel station simply to Chapel, after a council-funded report claimed the existing designation reinforces racial stereotypes and gives into a narrative of colonialism. I mean, given this entrance to the station looks like this, maybe it is only a matter of time. But we were thinking, and I know it's after midday, so I'm telling you that these aren't true, but my team did come up with some other fun examples for this show. We thought, how could we trick you, Elon Musk, becoming a UK citizen? Meghan sitting down with me for a shock new podcast. I thought that was very good. And Starmer identifying as the greatest PM ever. And of course, that would have to be, as the left call it, a self-ID. But now, onto the real news this April Fool's Day, and Nigel Farage has hit back at critics of Reform UK's new policies, cutting out party loyalists, admitting he is now rejecting candidates for historic posts on X that contain swear words.
And we go back through their social media history and find that they repeatedly use swear words. Well, we just can't have that. Yeah. Or they express opinions that, frankly, either are or could be interpreted as being extreme or deeply prejudiced. So, yes, we have set a very high standard, and yes, there are some people out there who are unhappy that they've not passed vetting.
Meanwhile, in broken Britain, we are living in fantasy land, with Slippery Starmer making policy based on a fictitious Netflix series where the ethnicity of the main character teenage boy was changed from black to white.
Morning. Morning. Thank you very much for being here. In a minute, we're going to bring the media in, but before we do, I just wanted to say, let's start talking about this.
I'll bring you all the madness in my digest next. Then I'm so excited about today's superstar panel. What a dream team. Alex Phillips of the That's What She Said Substack, and Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, historian, royal commentator, so much more, both with us today. And also coming up on the show, Gary Stevens, the multimillionaire trader turned hard left tax the rich economist, who is now a favourite across the MSM, has been accused of telling outlandish lies about his past by his former colleagues. We'll get into that. Prince Harry has been cast aside by one of his former allies and friends. He's also, at the same time, been thrown under the bus by another ally, as the Sentebale charity racism, harassment and bullying scandal just gets worse by the hour. And as Prince Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre's credibility about to be forever smashed. This is a completely bizarre story. I'll take you right through it. Then in the uncancelled after show on Substack, Piers Morgan speaks out about how he caused a major new royal row between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle and Princess Eugenie as the Sussex divorce rumours grow. Our royal mastermind, Angela Levin, will be on deck for that at www.outspoken.live. You can register completely for free to join the Outspoken Revolution. Also at the end of the show today, we'll reveal today's greatest Britain and Union Jackass. You, of course, choose the Union Jackass. You can vote right now on the live chat on YouTube. But here are the nominees. James O'Brien, nominated by Alan for saying it's unthinkable that Kemi Badenoch hasn't watched the fictional Netflix drama Adolescence. We're going to come to that in just a moment. Mike Tapp, nominated by Tom John 1975 for humiliating himself after misleading comments about Nigel Farage. Tapp tweeted a picture of a front page saying, "The media are catching on," that Reform UK posed a risk to hardworking people and the precious NHS. However, what Tapp presented as media coverage was actually a paid party political advertisement by Labour. And nominee 3, Christopher Hope of GB News, nominated by @Whitehorse, and that is for not covering the Rupert Lowe fundraiser. It's at well over £400,000 now for the rape gang inquiry. Just incredible. We'll announce the Greatest Britain at the end of the show too. Let me know your comments. I love reading them out. I will pick the best at the end of the show. But now, let's go. We are truly being governed by a clown. Yep, he's evil, he's deranged, he's duplicitous, but he's also a goddamn clown. And that is a toxic combination. Because yesterday, Slippery Starmer took time out from a day which should be filled trying to turn around the dying economy, trying to stop the invasion of the southern border, trying to save free speech. He took time out from all of that to host a meeting about a fictitious Netflix drama not anchored in any form of reality. Indeed, this show called Adolescence, which, by the way, I liked and I watched and I thought it was very, very good, but that's not the point because it's a fantasy. So much of a fantasy that the main character was based on this guy, 17-year-old black Croydon teenager Hassan Sentebale, who stabbed the 15-year-old Eliane Andam to death over a teddy bear. But to make the show respectable or acceptable to woke Hollywood, the main character was switched to that kid. A young working class lad who, yes, is white and from Liverpool. Yet the left have decided this drama represents all the ills in British society. Not the out-of-control Islamist terror threat, not the shocking hike in knife crime amongst black youngsters. Because, of course, it's so much easier to discuss young white boys, right, who are being influenced by Andrew Tate. And that idiot Starmer even described the show as a documentary in Parliament. And then he posted yesterday on X, as a father watching Adolescence with my teenage son and daughter hit home hard. We all need to be having these conversations more. I've backed Netflix's plan to show the series for free in schools across the country so as many young people as possible can see it. And then it got worse, folks, because our Prime Minister spent time awkwardly, and trust me, I'm not exaggerating, it is awkward, it is wooden, filming a social media clip, but he did so in the style of the Netflix show because the whole thing about Adolescence is it's filmed in one take. So Starmer thought it would be clever to do the same thing. Watch.
Hello. Nice to see you. How are you? Good to see you again.
Thank you for having us.
No, very good. You know what it's like on the inside. Most people don't. They sort of think it's going to be small, and then it's always much bigger. But come on in.
Okay.
Come on
forward
in.
to it.
Beautiful
Thank you.
day as well. Really incredible.
Sun's come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No, it's great. Come on in.
We've got a big crowd coming in.
We have. And so this is the sort of famous, just behind the door, we've got the portrait of the Queen here.
I mean, how is this real? How is this real? But it went on. Watch.
Morning. Morning. Thank you very much for being here. In a minute, we're going to bring the media in, but before we do, I just wanted to say, let's start talking about this.
Now, thank God I'm not the only one thinking we have quite literally gone mad. Matt Goodwin posted, "Am I the only person who finds it absolutely baffling that just 2 months ago, Keir Starmer refused to hold a national inquiry into the rape gangs despite evidence from thousands of girls, but yet is now falling all over himself to reshape policy on, quote, toxic masculinity based on nothing more than a TV show?" My friend Neil Oliver added, "Fiction about a white boy provoking a response while real-world daily bloodshed and horror in Britain is swept under the carpet. We see you." And what about the woman who knows this stuff best, Britain's toughest head teacher, Catherine Birbalsingh, who couldn't hide her disdain, writing to Starmer, You find Adolescence shocking because you aren't in kids' online worlds. Kids already know this is happening. Getting kids to watch Adolescence will make zero difference. What you need to do as PM is ban phones to under 16s. But he won't, because the media play along with his clown world, with Nick Ferrari this morning on the Labour Broadcasting Company actually haranguing the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch for not having watched a bloody TV drama. Save me.
Heard from the Prime Minister yesterday that he's watched that TV, the Netflix series Adolescence. What have you learnt from that, Mrs. Badenoch?
Well, I haven't watched it. I don't have time to watch anything these days, to be honest. But I have read about it.
The Prime Minister had time to watch it, Mrs. Badenoch.
Yes, well, they have. And so what I understand is that this is a fictional representation of a story that is actually quite different. And I think it's an interesting story. It certainly touches on some of the things that are happening in the world today. But it is not the biggest thing that is happening in the world today in terms of what is happening to people being radicalized on social media.
But many would say for a leading politician such as yourself not to be in tune with what a lot of people are talking about, that's almost a dereliction of duty, some would suggest. And not least as you have a child approaching their teens.
Yes, I do. So I pay attention, but I'm not going to watch every single thing that everybody's watching on Netflix. I do know what they're watching, and I know what it's about. And I've given a view that it is a work of fiction that is interesting, that touches on a problem in society, but there are bigger problems, such as Islamic terrorism and that kind of radicalization.
And trust me, Britain is in real trouble. We have no time for this sort of clown world where the Prime Minister is making policy based on a Netflix drama. Look what's going on. Just overnight, the US has put any hopes of a trade deal at risk because of this country's insane decision to walk away from a commitment to free speech. The State Department has expressed, and this is really significant, public horror at the shocking case of Livia Tasiki-Bolt, who is being prosecuted for holding a sign near a Bournemouth abortion clinic reading, "Here to talk, if you want." That's all her sign said. This official statement from the State Department said US-UK relations share a mutual respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. However, as Vice President Vance has said, we are concerned about freedom of expression in the United Kingdom. It is important that the UK respect and protect freedom of expression. And a source familiar with the trade negotiations actually told the Daily Telegraph there should be no free trade without free speech. But a Whitehall source, so as in one of Labour's goons, sought to downplay the significance of free speech to trade talks, telling the Telegraph, "We know it is something they have a bugbear about. We are happy to have discussions on our own broader, wide-ranging relationship." Now that makes me furious. A bugbear? Free speech isn't a goddamn bugbear. It's fundamental to everything. So I am just completely disgusted at what we have become in such a short space of time as a country and how normalised this madness is. Nigel Farage has spoken out on this today, revealing he believes the government has now blown it with the US administration.
J.D. Vance was right, wasn't he?
All I want to say is this. This is a tremendous wasted opportunity. We had a free trade deal with America on the table in 2017. Trump wanted to do a deal with us. He told me that himself. But of course, under the Conservatives, despite the Brexit vote, it took us years and years and years to leave the European Union. We missed the opportunity, and I'm afraid these tariffs are going to hurt. So I'm very unhappy at this squandered opportunity. Quite what the extent, and Marco Rubio as well, of course, is being quoted in this, quite what the extent of, unless you have free speech, you can't have free trade is. I don't think any of us quite know what's going on right now behind the scenes, but I think we've really rather blown it with America, I'm afraid.
And good Lord, I mean, it's because Farage understands that and those types of issues, which is why for so long I believe Reform UK was our great hope. But I'm not going to lie, that has been rocked by the Rupert Lowe scandal of the past month, and Farage's comments during that interview with Mike Graham this morning didn't help from my point of view because, and I know lots of you are going to be concerned about this, he admitted that under Zia Yusuf's reform plans, of Reform UK, the party is now rejecting candidates. And, you know, I've reported a lot about what people have been rejected for, like a woman who was rejected for the fact that she had a shoplifting conviction when she was 16 years old, now a highly successful business person she can't stand. But Nigel actually admitted this morning, in a way that made it clear he was proud of this, that candidates are now being rejected for historic posts on X that contain swear words.
Before, we've had a bit of a rocky few weeks, haven't they, with the departure of Rupert Lowe. I've been asked by a few people to ask you a question about the way that some local sort of reform groups have been treated. Some people are saying that, you know, they joined reform in various different parts of the country, but the professionalism or the professionalisation has meant that a lot of people have either stepped down as chairman of local groups, or they've been asked to step down. I mean, is there a problem in local groups of reform?
The problem is that we are vetting people to a much higher standard than the other political parties. And we're doing that because we ourselves will be held to a higher standard than everybody else, because we're the challengers against the establishment. So, for example, you know, we have somebody who's a candidate, and we go back through their social media history and find that they repeatedly use swear words. Well, we just can't have that.
Yeah.
Or they express opinions that, frankly, either are or could be interpreted as being extreme or deeply prejudiced. So, yes, we have set a very high standard, and yes, there are some people out there who are unhappy that they've not passed vetting. But, you know, after the disaster that we had with some of those unvetted candidates at the last general election, you know, I made a pledge that I would professionalise the party. And, you know, there are some people that don't like it, but generally, look, you know, last year in the local elections, Reform fielded candidates in 12% of seats. On May the 1st, we will be at or damn close to 100%. We've set up 400 branches. You know, we are professionalising it, and it does come with a certain ruthlessness.
Sure.
What does my superstar panel think? Let me bring them in now. Alex Phillips and Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. So good to have you both here, but can we start, please, with what went on at Downing Street in regards to this Netflix drama Adolescence? Look, Alex Phillips, I think it's a really good drama, okay? But it is a drama. The main character's ethnicity has been changed. I have literally seen quotes from one of the creators and writers admitting that. Why is this government treating it as if it is a documentary?
It's absolutely insane. I mean, that the hyperbole surrounding what is a pretty average drama, I've watched it, it was okay, find it pretty boring in places, is utterly ridiculous, but it's serving as a distraction technique. It's there because people find it very safe to criticize men, criticize boys, criticize teenage boys, and especially if they're white, that is okay. It means they get to do that. They get to sort of shower themselves with moral rectitude and be seen to be being assertive when it comes to social issues without actually having to go anywhere near the really hot potatoes, which is things such as knife crime, which is largely perpetrated by young black men, which is things such as the misogyny, which is endemic within the Muslim community. I mean, it's so much easier, isn't it, to go, oh, look, there's these young guys who are following Andrew Tate online and they're becoming incels and they're stabbing girls. This isn't happening every day. You know, the way that there's been this furore over this drama, you would think that there's a murder of a young girl every day at the hands of a teenage boy who likes Andrew Tate. It's for the birds. It's utter madness. And yet we're not having a conversation, are we, about other things that are utterly critical. If they wanted to protect young people, they would have acted a lot faster and you know, with a lot more sort of assertiveness when it comes to pornography and the extremes of pornography that is getting into young people's hands. They've done nothing about that. They've tinkered around the edges. They could have easily just said, we're going to pull the plug on user-generated porn websites because they're pumping out content that is very harmful to young people. You know, it's gesture politics. And not only is it gesture politics, it is, you know, typically in line with the tropes and the safety of things that they feel they can talk about, which gets them off the hook of not talking about the things we need them to talk about.
So true. And Rafe, isn't this actually quite a dangerous psyop, though, given that now it is going to be played in schools, and the clear message is, if you are a young white boy you are responsible for the evils in Britain today.
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely imagine, the scenes in the classroom after one of these episodes finishes. You're going to have all these white boys feeling guilty and ashamed. You'll have the girls sort of sneering at them and despising them for misogyny and epitomizing everything that's bad about white male privilege. And you'll probably have the ethnic minority boys thinking, well, none of this applies to us, actually, so we can just sit back and ignore all of this. It's deeply insidious stuff. Of course, it's just the latest example of what we've seen for the last few years, where every time that the government or the police or indeed the Mayor of London puts out one of these public awareness videos about misogyny or about sexual harassment, even about gang rape, they of course cast a white male as the villain in all of this. And, it's very funny when every other program you watch on television, they manage to shoehorn ethnic minorities into every white role. The one time you actually would expect to see an ethnic minority, it's actually a white person performing that role. The reason, of course, is quite clear. It's because it fulfills the liberal metropolitan elite worldview. Whenever there's an attack or something, it's always, of course, online content that's the problem, and it's deflection. As Alex was just saying there, we know the real issues here are, of course, Islamic extremism and the huge amount of misogyny that exists amongst Britain's Black and Asian communities. Andrew Tate is always raised up by people who are criticizing what's happening with our youth today. 80% of British male youth have heard of Andrew Tate. Only a quarter actually support him. And that quarter is overwhelmingly composed of people from our ethnic minority communities.
No, very, very good point. And then, Alex Phillips, we have the whole issue of free speech coming back to haunt this government. Do you remember Starmer in his Oval Office meeting saying, oh, no, we absolutely have free speech, getting furious about the fact that J.D. Vance had raised it. But then there is the case of Livia Tochichi Bolt being prosecuted for holding a sign near a Bournemouth abortion clinic. The sign simply read, "Here to talk if you want." And the State Department have gone on the record on this. So we don't have free speech now, and it could be costing the country dear.
Yeah, of course we don't have free speech. And the thing is, it's not just about prosecutions, which are harrowing and ghoulish enough that we now live in a country with effectively a Stasi in operation. The scenes of that producer from Times Radio having the police come and bang on his door because he had criticized the school in a WhatsApp group. I mean, you can laugh at these things and say it's farcical. At the very least, it's a waste of police time. But the problem is we don't have free speech, and we're all aware of it, because every time we want to raise an issue, if we wanted to try and say, oh, guess what? Look, Andrew Tate actually converted to Islam. I wonder why. Probably because he loves a bit of misogyny. I might be able to say that on your show. I wouldn't dare say it on any other platform, even though it's true. I'm pretty sure what attracted him to that particular religion is the sort of very sort of firm patriarchal nature of it. But you can't say things like that, and you don't know why you can't say them. You just know you can't say them. So even if the police haven't come and knocked on our doors, we do all live within prisons inside our mind. And this isn't just about decency. This isn't just about kindness. This isn't just about being polite or being moderate in our views so as we don't incite any sort of hatred. This is about not even being able to raise topics, talk about issues that are now actively blighting society. And very often, more often than not, the people who end up as the victim of this are young women, because it's very often women's safety that is at risk when it comes to the attitudes of certain minority communities, and we're not allowed to criticize them. So, I have this great umbrage, frankly. I'm fed up with feeling like my safety and my integrity comes last, that it's okay to throw me under the bus in order to protect some other people from synthetic offense. I mean, I'm a white person. Am I offended when someone says something about white people? No, I'm a grown-up, I'm an adult. And yet what we're seeing increasingly in today's society is overt racism towards white people, whether it's the botched sentencing guidelines that have now been postponed. whether it's this case of free speech and whether we can't criticize mass immigration or can't criticize the lack of integration in society. The fact that we're going to have rolled out an Islamophobia law and yet there's no protections against Christians, and clearly there's another woman concerned about abortion, probably a Christian, who finds herself arrested for her religious views. I mean, this is what we've become now in 2025, and it's deeply disturbing.
It is deeply disturbing. I want to ask you, Rafe, about the comments that Nigel Farage made in regards to Reform UK and the vetting situation, which I've been doing quite a lot of reporting on. Now, I have real concerns about this. Obviously, there's been the big civil war going on. We've spoken about it a lot. But do you think it's sensible for Reform UK to say that if you have sworn a bit on your social media post, that means you're disqualified from standing as a candidate? What about this this businesswoman, very successful businesswoman now, who has been rejected because at 16 years old, she was convicted of shoplifting? Now, I would say, actually, isn't that just a brilliant story about how you can turn your life around?
Yeah, no, on that point, I think you're absolutely right. And I think you would have to certainly look at each of these situations on a case-by-case basis. What degree of swearing are we talking about? I mean, nobody wants a proper foul-mouthed MP in Parliament, somebody who's incapable of completing a sentence without one expletive or another. So you have to look at gradations, what words are being used in what context. And it's also a case, of course, how long ago this was. So certainly in the case of somebody who was arrested as a teenager, but has then become actually a role model and an example of how to turn one's life around, I would think that's just the sort of person you want to bring on board, particularly for reform. And I think there needs to be a lot of care taken here. It's understandable, and I fully appreciate why there is a need to professionalize the Reform Party to make it ready for government. But it has to be quite clear that by doing so, it's not alienating its core membership. And there's a big battle here, as you say, a civil war going on about all of that. It needs to ensure that it is ready and fit to take office if that's the case, but it can't jettison not only candidates who've been loyal servants of the party for so many years, but also, of course, those policies that the core base of reform cleave to so very much. I mean, I'm firmly on the side of mass deportation of illegal immigrants, even voluntary remigration of naturalized citizens. Those are the core issues which I think the party was founded on, and it must make sure that it doesn't deviate too much from that. They're just lucky that Robert Jenrick isn't the leader of the opposition right now, because if Jenrick was the leader of the opposition, you would certainly be seeing reform perhaps not doing as well as.
Well, he's becoming a political superstar, actually, and the problem is he might outflank Nigel a little bit on the right. Alex, Richard B in the live chat wants me to ask a question of you, but first I just want to show you, just to prove that it is real, it has happened. Rupert Lowe has raised £424,000 for his rape gang inquiry from 13,000 supporters. And Richard B asks Alex, please ask Alex if all of Rupert's supporters are still bots, as she suggested last week. Did bots raise £405,000 towards the grooming inquiry? You've got to admit, this is impressive, right?
But at no point did I say all of Rupert Lowe's supporters were bots. I did say that there's been a swarm of bot activity. That's now been proven, actually. A report was commissioned into looking at the online activity surrounding this confected division within the party, and it showed a huge amount of bot activity. In fact, the company that was used, which is the company that audited X on behalf of Elon Musk before he bought it to scan for bots, said that they'd never seen such a big or sophisticated bot campaign. I'm pretty sure that report is soon going to be released. I've intimated on X myself that I'd spoken to industry insiders, because I know a lot of people who work in the field of cyber intelligence, and they had told me that they'd seen a huge amount of bot activity. It's now been proven. The report's been done. It's in the hands of Reform, so it's up to them to publish it. I didn't say that everyone who supports Rupert Lowe is a bot, but I think people do need to understand what has been at play here. There has been a deliberate augmentation of Rupert's profile. Look, I'm a fan of Rupert. I think he's is great. We're Brexit Party MEPs together. But there was a deliberate augmentation of his profile. There was a deliberate putting out around information that Nigel Farage was against immigration all of a sudden, which isn't true, absolutely not. And then when there was this division that happened between the two, I think there have been tensions between the two for a long time. I don't know. I'm not in the middle of all of this. I don't want to be. But that also saw a huge amount of exacerbation, very deliberately by a very sophisticated and intent bot campaign, which has now ceased. I've noticed it's ceased because it's no longer bombarding me on my own timeline. The amount of abuse I got for, I don't know, having worked with Nigel for so long, for refusing to pick a side. I mean, what on earth am I supposed to do? I've known Nigel for pretty much all of my adult life. I'm a dear friend of his. I've known Rupert Lowe. We sat in Parliament together. You know, it's like parents divorcing or something. You don't have to pick between mum and dad. So just leave me out of it. But it is true that there was a sophisticated bot campaign. That is just the truth, okay? And like I said, when that report is published, I hope people do read it, and I hope that with that in mind, they question whether or not they got swept up in something that, yes, there is a fallout. Yes, something's gone on in that party that I don't fully understand. I'll never know all the details of it. Yes, it's a great tragedy that both sides, frankly, have behaved pretty appallingly in public when it comes to putting, you know, articles in newspapers or press releases out. I mean, it's just, it frankly has been rather unedifying for the party. But I hope we can all move on from this. Now, talking about Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry, I think it's a wonderful thing. He's taken this very seriously from the beginning, and I think it's a great incentive. What I would say is this: £424,000 is an astonishing amount of money. Unfortunately, inquirers tend to run into their millions. I'm not sure how far £400,000 is going to go. I think it's probably going to need to be a lot more than that if it's going to be able to be a full and thorough inquiry. But also, this inquiry is not going to have statutory powers, and that is a concern, because having statutory powers, if an inquiry has been initiated by the government, it means it has the legal powers to demand to speak to people, to get their testimonies, to be able to interview witnesses. And unfortunately, with something that doesn't have statutory powers, there is no incentive for anybody to have to go and speak to a lawyer or be part of this inquiry. So it will stymie the ability of what that inquiry can actually deliver. And I hope that they have considered this, and that Rupert has potentially another place he can send that money to if he finds out the inquiry can't really take place in any meaningful way. I don't know if it can. I think it's a great initiative in principle. And so this isn't a criticism of Rupert, but again, let's not let facts, suddenly become villains of the piece. The fact of the matter is it isn't a statutory inquiry, and inquiries tend to cost millions of pounds.
Breaking right now, Gary Stevenson, the multi-millionaire trader turned hard-left tax-the-rich economist, who is now a favourite across the MSM, even appearing on the British Bashing Corporation's Question Time, has been accused of telling outlandish lies about his past by his former colleagues. They say the claims about his former career are trumped up, putting into doubt all of his ludicrous rhetoric, which he's now using to make many more millions across social media. So if you're not aware of this cretin, here he is on Piers Morgan.
Listen, I made a lot of money, enough to quit and run a YouTube channel.
How much? Just give it to me straight. Enough, in the book, tell me.
Enough to quit, run a YouTube channel and have a family. That's enough.
Well, 30 million, 50 million?
Listen, do you have a spreadsheet? Do you have a spreadsheet?
No.
I don't have a fucking spreadsheet. All I know is it's enough. I can go to Nando's.
You said you put it in the book, though, how much it is.
Yeah, but I didn't add it all up. You read the book and add it up.
Well, how much is it?
Roughly. I don't fucking know. Listen.
What, 10, 50, 100 million?
It's enough for me to live for the rest of my life.
I'm not trying to trap you.
No, it's the 10, 50, 100 million. It's enough. Enough for an ordinary person to live the rest of their life.
How much is that?
Family. The number I had in my head when I went into banking, was £2 million.
2 million?
And it was enough. For me, that's enough.
You've made more than 2 million. You were Citibank's top guy.
I don't have this stuff up. For me, it's enough. I've got enough money. I've got enough to do the work that I do.
Do you give a little bit away?
Ordinary people.
Do you redistribute your own wealth?
That is the money that funds my YouTube channel. Listen.
Well, do you
tell me this now, right?
When you sell a book, do you keep the money for the book?
If I give the money away,
of course he does. Of course he does. He's a capitalist. But in other boastful interviews, Stevenson has been far from bashful, claiming he lost £8 million in a week.
What was the most amount of money that you lost?
Well, I lost $8 million in a week when I was in 2010, when I was still 23. I lost $8 million in a week. And that was mad because I graduated in 2008. So a lot of my mates couldn't get jobs. Obviously, that was the financial crisis, right? And I was like halfway through this week by that point, and I'd already lost like $5 million in 3 days. And all my mates around just like playing Pro Evolution. And you're just thinking like, I've lost $5 million. Like, how much more can I lose before I lose my job? It really dehumanizes you.
I wouldn't trust a word this guy said. As Richard Kay reported for the Daily Mail today, what does not seem to have hurt him, so far at least, are troubling questions about the credibility of some of the flamboyant claims this former London School of Economics student has made about his working history. So what is the truth about his claim that he had been Citibank's most profitable trader globally, which he now suggests, in his foul language, made him the best effing trader in the effing world? What's rubbish, according to the Financial Times, with his colleagues on the record telling the newspaper of his delusions of grandeur, like Kent Bray, who worked on the trading desk alongside him and said he was stunned when he heard Stevenson claim to have been Citi's top trader. I contacted him, he said, and I said, is this book fiction or non-fiction? And he said it's non-fiction. Richard Kay's report goes on to say, yet according to Bray, who had been his mentor, Stevenson was not in the running for the title of best trader at the London branch of Citi, let alone the world. Of the £35 million Stevenson claimed to have made the bank in his best year, Bray was contemptuous, saying, it sounds like a lot of money for people not in the trade, but in all the time I was at Citibank, that's not going to make you the most profitable trader globally. Another former colleague described the young Gary as okay, but not exceptional, adding he wasn't even close to being one of the stars. That individual said Stevenson's claim about being one of the best in any 1 year is laughable and clearly just an outlandish fib. Alex Phillips, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, my superstar panel back with me. Rafe, the issue I have with this is not about how much money this guy made. It's about the fact that if he cannot even tell us the truth about his history as a trader, then why on earth should we trust his clearly ludicrous prescription to try and save the economy?
Yeah, exactly. And look, I worked in the city at the same time he did. I was at Deutsche Bank from 2007 to 2009 as well. And £35 million is not a huge amount of money to make. And notice how clever he was. He didn't tell Piers Morgan that he personally lost 5 or 8 million. He could have been saying he lost his bank 5 or 8 million. And that's what we see a lot with this chap, is a lot of attempts to essentially muddy the water so you're not quite sure whose money or what money he's talking about. But as we saw on Question Time, this man's claim to have any sound understanding of the British economy is severely flawed. Just because you're a good market trader doesn't mean that you actually have a great grasp of the UK economy. For example, he was saying that to plug the deficit for benefit claimants, we should just tax the billionaires more, and said that in the 50s, 60s and 70s, we had a wealth tax here, which enabled his father to have a decent life. Actually, we didn't have a wealth tax in the 50s, 60s and 70s. What we had were very high income taxes, high marginal rates of income tax, but that wasn't a wealth tax at all. And also his idea of essentially increasing taxes on millionaires and billionaires, everywhere that's been tried, in France, Switzerland briefly, and elsewhere, it's been a catastrophic failure. And Britain now ranks as the #2 country in the world for an exodus of millionaires, behind only China. This is, sixth form or common room university economics of the very worst kind. And the fact that his book has on the front cover a glowing review from Rory Stewart, of all people, tells you all that you need to know about this chap's credentials.
Yeah, indeed. Rory Stewart, who bet £100,000 or said he was going to bet £100,000 on Kamala Harris becoming the US president. Alex Phillips, why is the mainstream media so determined to make this guy, who clearly has credibility issues, a superstar? They are just determined to do it.
Yeah, and why is it that they chose some sort of strange, odd little syndromic child from Sweden who didn't go to school to suddenly be the world's expert on meteorology and climate change, and sort of paraded her around at the UN and in front of world leaders and beatified her and held her up as some sort of strange goblin oracle? It's because it fits their ideology. This is the latest creature that they've dug up, who they've decided is going to be beatified and fetishized because he has hard left principles. And they just love it. And yet, you know, Rafe was pointing out actually about wealth taxes. We have the highest burden of tax that we have done since the Second World War. So many people are leaving the United Kingdom now. The capital flight is absolutely astonishing. 10,000 millionaires have left the UK. And do you know what the left do? They sit there and go, oh, yeah, brilliant, bye-bye, you know, sorry the door slammed on the way out. But those people were the biggest tax contributors. Where's the money going to be coming from to go into the Treasury that then is redistributed to people who got off a boat yesterday and have to have a 4-star hotel room? You know, where is all this money going to come from if the wealthy people are not there to be taxed? And this is in basic economic principles called the Laffer curve. You reach a certain point where taxation is at such a height that actually what happens is you end up getting less money. In fact, the less you tax, the less punitive the tax system, the more tax you often get, because more people aren't trying to avoid it or evade it. People are willing to pay up to a certain amount because they think it's a pretty good deal, especially if they're getting decent public services in return. But what we've got now are people feeling like we just have a punitive system that's fewer than, actually, I think it's 48% of people, if not fewer, are net contributors into the system. Over 50% of the population are actually earning money off the government. And when it comes to the people who actually pay the most into society, it's a vanishingly small percentage. And yet they don't get anything from the government. They're demonized. And instead, this absolute joke of a cretin who's got a CV that should, you know, warrant him a position on the Labour front bench. At least we know with his potty mouth he's not going to be a reform candidate. Really turned into some sort of, you know, modern day sage. I mean, it's just laughable, but they do this every time, Dan.
You're so right comparing him to Greta Thunberg, because he's just as annoying. Like, watch him on the Diary of a CEO boast about the fact that, like, just no one can do what he does.
What would your advice be to them, Gary, at this moment in time?
This is such a hard question. I know Dan's angry at me for what I put in my video, How to Get Rich. Somebody came around to my house and asked me this the other day. Obviously, I get asked it a lot because, stupidly, I'm very public about the fact that I'm rich. What I did is not replicable. It's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. People always say, why don't you teach me to trade? Like, it's hard. It's hard trading and it's dangerous. And I think a lot of young men are getting sort of sold into trading and becoming gambling addicts. You know, work hard.
And some of his rhetoric, I would argue, is actually bordering on dangerous. Listen to when he invokes the Holocaust.
Very hard to keep wealth in generations.
Down in the 20th century, we had 2 world wars and a Holocaust. That redistributed wealth. I would prefer not to have that again.
Yeah.
Rafe, what's he getting at there?
I've got no idea what he's talking about at all. I don't think even he knows what he's talking about. I mean, look, this guy is clearly just a snake oil salesman. He's a self-publicist. He's got a look. Gary the Geezer is his nickname because of the way he dresses. And that just plugs in so well to the liberal metropolitan elite's idea of the sort of cheeky chappy they like. That's why Rory Stewart's on the front cover of the book. It's a bit like Andrew Tate, right? But on the other end of the spectrum. This is someone who just came from nowhere, completely reinvented himself in a brand new image that may or may not be based in reality. And it's very dangerous because, of course, people in the broader public, on the left particularly, are looking to him as a messiah. But apparently all of his solutions are simply veneer thin. There's no substance behind any of it.
No, that's very true, isn't it, Alex Phillips?
Yeah, he seems to me actually that he's got either borderline personality disorder or narcissism. I mean, he is just a huge self-promoter, and there doesn't seem to be much going on inside the confines of his mind. He's hardly particularly articulate. He doesn't say anything original. He just seems to come out with spews out a load of tropes. And a bit like I said, Greta Thunberg, they all sit there going, "Yeah, isn't he wonderful?" I'm waiting for the, allegations to come out about something he's done, or, the malpractice he may have conducted. I don't know. Not saying he has, but usually when you have these people who are venerated as superstars, because they've pushed themselves forward so hard due to narcissism, you usually find there's some pretty horrible, ugly secrets in their wake. So let's wait and see what comes out. But I don't give a stuff about this man. They can stick him on Question Time as much as they like. I just think he's a moron.
He is a moron. And of course, he is a moron who unfortunately we are going to be seeing a lot more of, because as Alex says, he is going to push a narrative that suits what the establishment wants, that suits what the mainstream media wants. Be very, very careful supporting this guy. And as Rafe said, and I think we saw it there, any type of endorsement from Rory Stewart is an immediate reason to just switch off. Breaking right now, Prince Harry has been cast aside by one of his former allies and friends who appeared in his Netflix series, and thrown under the bus by another as this Sentebale charity racism, harassment, bullying, and cover-up scandal gets worse by the hour. Now, central to this story is the treatment of the charity chief, a very wonderful woman called Dr. Sophie Chandoka, by Meghan Markle. And this is new footage, which we have seen today, which shows her acting like a, quote, mean girl by ignoring the accomplished woman of colour at the charity event, the Sentebale charity event, which sparked this big bust up because, of course, when Dr. Sophie refused to go public to defend Meghan Markle's behaviour, that's when Harry went mad. Meanwhile, Harry's friend and apparent ally, Alex Rayner, he is an old Etonian school pal of the prince who went to the North Pole with him in 2012, has made the situation even more grim. He told the Daily Mail overnight, H is very happy for me to speak for him about how he feels about this awful situation. He is just beyond heartbroken and flabbergasted that the charity he founded as a teenager has been taken hostage by the chair. It feels tantamount to a hostile takeover. It feels like Dr. Sophie had her nose put out of joint because she was not the most important woman of colour on the stage. There is an undercurrent of stink here because Meghan showed up and it is coming from her. Dr. Sophie, the chair, should never have let that narrative take hold that Meghan had caused an issue. If that narrative did take hold, then I would argue it is down to the chair to put it right. They could have issued a statement and put a stop to it, but they did not. Why? Again, this whole thing smells, it feels planned, and I suspect that the whole thing could only have come from the chair herself. Wow, that is totally tone deaf, because I want to show you what happened on stage at that charity event. I covered it at the time. The mainstream media did not, but watch closely, because it's not Dr. Sophie Chandoka who causes an issue, it is Meghan Markle.
Thank you very much, Andrew Tucker, for putting on such a great day here at Crown Polo Club. Again, a big thank you to all those who provided horses.
Meanwhile, Kahindi Andrew, a Harry and Meghan ally, he's actually a revolting guy, but he appeared on their Netflix show, has now brutally turned on Harry, suggesting that he probably is racist. So we're going to get analysis from Rafe Heydel-Mankoo and Alex Phillips imminently, but first I just want you to watch what he had to say to Piers Morgan.
None of this is very good, is it?
It is undoubted that when Harry and Meghan were in the family, they experienced problems, as anybody would expect. That royal family is one of the symbols of white supremacy, is deeply racist, so they experienced that. It is also true that Prince Harry is a representative of that symbol of white supremacy. What do you expect? Are we actually surprised that someone from the elite, from the aristocracy, went to Africa in his gap year, started a charity, and then acts really pompous and imperial to the black woman who runs it? This is not news. Honestly, this is not news. Two things can be true. They experience racism and they complain about it. And yes, more than likely Harry is even if these accusations aren't true, it's deeply unlikely that Prince Harry has not acted in a colonial manner in his pet project on the African continent. So.
Isn't this great? It's the woke eating itself. This is why Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were so stupid to align themselves, with a man like Kahindi Andrew. He hadn't finished.
This is constant harassment that she's got. And like I said, I'm not a big fan. And I would also stress, I think it's important to say, look, I'm not a big fan of either of them. And I'm not surprised Prince Harry's been accused of these things, but you don't have to be a good person to have experienced racism. You can have experienced racism and be an awful person, and you can go and perpetuate racism later on.
Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, this is an astonishing story on so many levels. Where do you want to start?
Good. Well, let's start with the odious Kahindi Andrews, the most vile and despicable race grifter out there. And there's quite a crowded series of contestants for that title. Look, whether or not the accusations made against Harry and Meghan are true, I think most viewers of this channel will be feeling a great degree of schadenfreude that they are finally getting a taste of their own medicine, finding themselves now in precisely the position they put the royal family in with their baseless accusations of racism and bullying as well. And it may just very well be that, you know, Meghan has met more than her match in Dr. Chandauka here, who had a very impressive career, let's remember. This is not some thin-skinned snowflake who takes offense very quickly. And this is a corporate finance lawyer, ran internationally departments for Morgan Stanley, an international bank, set up a biotech company. She's an entrepreneur with that. Senior figure in Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook. This is a very, very senior and serious figure. And if she feels that if she wanted to launch a lawsuit, which she does, she must understand that she has the legal expertise to know that it's based upon some firm footing here. So I would be very worried if I was not only Prince Harry, but if I was a member of his board of trustees. And also, and the irony here, of course, is that this is not some conservative woman. She's also woke in herself. She wanted to turn Sentebale into a charity focused upon health, wealth, and climate resilience throughout Africa, having said, you know, having HIV/AIDS is no longer a death sentence. We need to expand our mission. And of course, she's now accusing Prince Harry of misogynoir. Now, misogynoir is a new term to me, but it means misogyny against black women. Now, that's precisely the sort of term you would have expected Meghan to come up with. And ironically, it's now being used against her husband as well. I mean, this is like watching an episode of Woke Gladiators, I would say here.
Yes,
or Woke Grievance Gladiators.
And I am going to enjoy it. Alex Phillips, what I found most astonishing about this line from Alex Rayner, who is claiming that he is speaking on behalf of Prince Harry, they're certainly friends, is that he said, it feels like Dr. Chandauka had her nose pointed out of joint because she was not the most important woman of colour on the stage. Now, that's quite a despicable thing to say, isn't it? He's suggesting that Dr. Sophie Chandauka is in some way jealous of Meghan Markle. Now, this is a woman who, as Rafe said, has been highly successful in her own career, didn't want to thrust herself in the public spotlight. Indeed, when Harry wanted her to speak out publicly, she didn't do so. So I just feel that's an outrageous claim.
Yeah, it is an outrageous claim. I mean, what has Meghan Markle done with her life? She opened some boxes on that prize show, whatever.
Oh, Deal or No Deal.
Dressed like a slapper, and she was in a pretty low-grade rubbish American sitcom, and then she, you know, pursued Harry doggedly because she's so desperate to be connected to somebody of celebrity status, so desperate to play the part of a royal. And then what's she done? She's just lounging around in Montecito, cooking rubbish food for Netflix, failing in all of her projects. So, you know, she's a bit low grade in my opinion. I'd much rather be mates with that other woman who's pretty impressive sounding. But this is always what happens, isn't it? Harry is so obsessed with Meghan. It's so peculiar. You know, something really sort of Oedipal and odd about that relationship. Meghan goes around pretending to be, you know, the sort of second coming of Princess Diana, his mum. He goes, isn't she gorgeous? Isn't she just like my mum? And it's like, well, don't stick your willy in her. That's really creepy. It can't sort of buy into this. Meghan is someone so sort of, super earthly and superhuman that we almost bow down at her feet. And the fact that he's allowed that to get in the way of his charitable work. This is a man who, as a young man, adored Africa, adored his visits there, was very proud of setting up these charities and these foundations that really gave him purpose in life. And everyone applauded him for it. But now he's allowed his sort of sick obsession with his own wife and his sort of jumping on the woke bandwagon to completely destroy the only thing that he's ever achieved as well.
Yeah, and I would say also that I think that an increasing number of people suspect that Dr. Chandauka's card was marked, target was put on her back the moment she refused to actually stand up for Meghan in that.
And Harry sent some type of abusive email, Rafe, and she says that she has the receipts for that. And look, I mean, it's really interesting seeing the reaction from this. Watch Jeremy Kyle here interviewing the royal author, Robert Jobson.
The silence is deafening from the press, from the people, and from them. I believe they've been found out, and I believe, genuinely hand on heart, there is no way back. And I'm afraid, for all the... I mean, I still read people going, oh, they're given such a... I've heard nothing, by the way, from those wailing lefties who go, oh, it's so unfair. You're really unfair to the spare. Isn't it interesting? And I'm just being straight for anybody who has a go at me. This was a woman of colour accusing him of bullying and harassment and misogyny. A woman of colour, after everything they said.
I know, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Who's clearly annoyed with the way that she's been treated, and I'm sure that she's going to have... She's she's not only a woman of colour, she's a very, very bright person, a doctor. She's a solicitor, a top lawyer, and I'm sure that would have kept a lot of notes on all of these things.
Yeah, very true. I agree with all of that. But what I also thought was fascinating, Rafe, is Queer Lips of Truth, which is a post on X, or they posted on X, but they're doing some really good work at the moment on the whole royal thing. And it really crystallized my thinking on this. They said, think about all the people Prince Harry has pressured to issue statements about his wife, who always leaves many crying in their wake. And the list is astonishing. The New York Police Department, Archewell staff, South African staff, Australian staff, Buckingham Palace staff, Kensington Palace staff, Sentebale, the Invictus Games, Gavin Newsom, the Uvalde survivors' families. The list goes on. And as Melanated Mona posted, Buckingham Palace continues to hide the bullying allegations. So the thing is, Rafe, this is not the first time. The Hollywood Reporter recently revealed that Meghan had been accused of bullying by Archewell staff as well, who described her as a dictator duchess in high heels. So maybe if this was the first sort of accusation, you'd look into it a bit more closely. But there are now so many of these.
Myriad accusations. Well, you got to see, the passive aggressiveness of Meghan just in that Sentebale polo match. You could see with the way she was gesturing. Had the cameras not been turned on, I wonder what you actually would have seen in reality. We know, of course, that the accusations have come from so many sources of bullying that there must certainly be more, like a kernel or more than a kernel of truth. And yet again, Prince Harry brings out the machines and his everything he can do to try to get people to defend her. Nadine Dorries had a very good article about this in the Mail. She calls it flying monkey syndrome, reference to the Wizard of Oz, where these monkeys were so beholden to the Wicked Witch of the West that they would do anything to protect her. And it sort of seems as if poor Prince Harry is suffering from this very same syndrome, even though it's causing damage not only to himself, but, to the charity that actually was one of the few things that's been a grounding element in most of his adult life. It's terribly depressing to see all of that.
Alex Phillips, what's interesting, you've spent a lot of time in Africa. What seems quite interesting here is there's this split between Sophie Chandoka, who wants to move much more of Sentebale's efforts actually out of Africa, not have them based in the UK or the US. Is this a common thing as people sort of move away from what is it called, the white savior narrative?
Perhaps. I mean, look, there's a huge amount of charitable work that takes place in Africa. A load of foreign aid goes into the continent. Certain cities like Nairobi, where I used to live, are very much the headquarters of most of the big charitable organizations. What was interesting, actually, is her sensible strategic approach of saying, HIV is no longer the big issue of the day. There's great access to medications often provided by foreign charities, and we need to start looking at doing other things. And it's a lot of Africans actually reflect this sentiment. Africans don't want to be on the receiving end of blank charity checks. What they want is to have grey-collar jobs. What they want is a sort of trade relationships between their countries and the rest of the world that enable them to have factories and enable them to be on production lines and enable them to become trade negotiators or HR managers and not just sort of work in the fields toiling for a few pennies a day. And I think I get the impression actually that that her approach to where she wanted the charity to go was probably the right one.
I think that's an important point, because if you look at the board of trustees have all resigned as well, but they're very much Harry's old guard. There's an old boys network who have similar attitudes and paternalistic beliefs to Prince Harry in terms of how you develop aid and so forth and help in Africa. And I think there's a great culture clash here, because who hasn't resigned? None of Dr. Chandauka's executive committee who actually work for the charity have resigned. None of her 500 staff have resigned. They seem to understand the need to go in a new direction. And they realize that this board of trustees, who've been there for far too long, as she said, they far extended the term that they should normally have served. They're simply not reflecting the reality of where Africa is at the moment and what this charity needs to do. She's a high-powered woman. She knows, she's a jet setter who knows what needs to be done. And I think they just simply are standing in the way of this charity.
Yes, very good point, Rafe. And remember as well, sitting alongside her on this during this extraordinary interview on Sly News at the weekend with Trevor Phillips was a guy called Ian Rawlinson, who is sticking by Dr. Sophie Chandauka. And he is a close ally of Prince William, which I think is another fascinating layer to all of this. But it is just worth having a look at, I would argue, the biggest bombshell from that interview.
Isn't the problem here that it was you was the problem, not the prince?
It was me who was the problem because I put a whistleblower complaint about the bullying, the harassment, and the misogyny, and Prince Harry interfered in the investigation of that. And the senior independent director who should have taken care of it was the very same person who then delivered the news to me that I was going to be removed by the board. So it's a cover-up, and the prince is involved.
I mean, that last line, Rafe, it's extraordinary. Because we know, even though it hasn't never been published, I know, that he was also involved in the cover-up of Meghan's bullying at Kensington Palace and then at Buckingham Palace.
It's the same old practice again, except this time, of course, things are different, because this time the Charity Commission itself is doing an investigation. And if it does find things that back up what Dr. Chandauka is saying, then it can actually take things onto a statutory footing for an investigation. So we are far from the end of this story. It has a long way to go, with potentially even more damaging revelations to come.
Indeed, and we will keep across this, of course. But Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, Alex Phillips, do stand by, because there has been an astonishing twist in the story of the Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and this could change everything for Prince Andrew. I'll explain. It really is an increasingly bizarre, but I would argue potentially very, very important story. So don't go anywhere. Much more of that in just 1 minute with Alex and Rafe. But first, the reason you're watching this show is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to trust mainstream media or the so-called fact-checkers who claim to determine which facts are true. And there's a good reason for that, given the debate over free speech, the controversy surrounding Brexit, and how Trump and other politicians challenging the status quo are portrayed. But I've found the solution. It's called Ground News, and it's the best way to stay informed and cut through media bias and narratives so you can get the facts for yourself. Go to ground.news/outspoken to check it out. But I want to show you this incredible website and app in action. So let's look, oh, he's my hero at the moment, as you know. Let's look at that game-changing speech by J.D. Vance, the US Vice President. He gave it at the Munich Security Conference. It was so wonderful. It was like a real changing of the guard moment. He tore into European governments, including the UK government, for a despicable retraction of free speech, which we have seen again today. And what Ground News does is quite clearly collate the 361 sources covering the story in one place. But what it does, different to all other news sources, is it breaks down how the story is being covered by whether these organizations lean to the left or the right. So it's called its bias distribution service. And what you can do is scroll down, see every article about the topic broken down by the political position and ownership of the publication. So in the case of the Vance speech, Newsmax and GB News gave fair and accurate coverage. By contrast, the Huffington Post and the Independent most certainly did not. The other great thing that Ground News does is that it gets to know you personally. And this brilliant feature called the blind spot feed surfaces upwards of 20 stories every single day that you might not be hearing about because of the corruption of the mainstream media. And the thing is, right, I know you love the media, you love the news, that is why you're watching Outspoken, but you don't trust the MSM. So what Ground News does is give you the tools to understand the truth about what is going on in the world. It's the only way I read the news. The website is great, but I also especially love the app on my phone because it allows me to see through media bias and manipulative narratives without relying on the MSM to define the truth for me. So you can go to ground.news/outspoken and check it out. What's more is that today you can subscribe through my link for 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use for unlimited access. So thank you, Ground News. And do remember, Ground News is subscriber funded. Supporting my sponsors also supports my work. And for less than a Netflix subscription, you can get all the world's news in one place. And think for yourself, this is a game changer for news junkies. Let me repeat the address, ground.news/outspoken. But now back to the show. Breaking right now, Prince Andrew's accuser, Virginia Giuffre's credibility may have just been forever smashed. The woman who forced the Duke into a megabuck settlement because of the late Queen's advanced cancer claimed, in what was an absolutely shocking Instagram post, that she was just days from death. She said she'd been in a serious car accident. The problem is, the Western Australian police, which is where this accident was apparently taken place, said they had only received one report of a minor crash between a school bus and a car. Now, it gets even worse because a police spokeswoman has said the collision was reported by the bus driver the following day, but there were no injuries as a result of the crash. The East Metropolitan Health Service, which runs the Royal Perth Hospital, told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation that Miss Giuffre was not at any of their facilities. And a Western Australian Public Transport Authority spokesperson told the ABC they were unaware of any such bus crashes. Now, why does this matter, I hear you ask? Well, it's all to do with whether we can trust Ms. Giuffre's photos. Because look at the photo again of her covered in bruises. It looks very, very serious. Of course it does. But is this photo genuine, given no injuries were reported as a result of the crash? And that matters, of course, because of the famous photo of Ms. Giuffre with Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. This was the photo that finished it all for Prince Andrew. Let's just be honest about that. And for many months, there have been serious doubts cast on whether that is a genuine picture. Prince Andrew's longtime ally, a friend of this show, Lady Victoria Harvey, mocked Virginia overnight as the, quote, queen of the fake photo. And I mean, it's a difficult one because, of course, I don't know for certain. Of course, I don't know for certain if this woman is days from death. But I do think you've got to take Lady V's point quite seriously, which is, she said, generally when you're dying, you're not thinking about posting a selfie. You're actually dying. And I do just want you to have a look at the 60 Minutes interview with 60 Minutes Australia, because I know the mainstream media will tell you Virginia Giuffre is a woman to be trusted. Just watch this interview and just really think again if she is telling the truth.
Prince Andrew denies the allegations against him, and he says that this photo is a fake, that he was never there, and that he's not his arm, and they're not his fingers.
Those are his fingers. That is Andrew. This photo has been verified as an original, and it's been since given to the FBI, and they've never contested that it's a fake. And I know it's real. And he needs to stop with all of these lame excuses. We're sick of hearing it. This is a real photo.
And that was the first time you met him?
And that's the very first time I met him. And that's right before I was abused by him.
Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell took the 17-year-old Virginia to London to party with Prince Andrew.
Then we went to Club Tramp, and he danced with me, and he sweats a lot, and he smells funny. And then we get in the car, and Ghislaine tells me in the car that I have to do what I do for Jeffrey for Prince Andrew. And that's when I learned what was going to happen.
How many times were you trafficked to him?
3 times.
Okay, let me bring in my superstar panel, Alex Phillips and Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Rafe, we don't know for sure, but I have spoken to allies of Prince Andrew today who simply say, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Could this be a game-changing moment if it does emerge that Virginia Giuffre is not being honest about this accident, if this photo is potentially not genuine?
That's right, because things are actually even more fishy, because this accident, which is supposed to have taken place on the 24th of March, she didn't post about this until Sunday. Now, her father had no knowledge of his daughter's accident until she made her own Instagram post. And you would have thought, if you are days or hours before death, that your father would have been notified in some capacity. Interestingly, also, 2 days before this crash, on the 22nd of March, she also put a very, very cryptic message on Instagram saying, which basically implied that she wasn't living with her children anymore. She said, "I miss my babies and they're being poisoned with lies. I miss them very much, and I've been away from them for too long." Now, what on earth does that mean? And is there a coincidence between that post on the 22nd and this mysterious crash, alleged crash on the 24th, of which no one has heard? And then she said, as you said, "I only have 4 days to live." But then she also said, "I'm being transferred to a specialist urology hospital." So obviously there is hope for her, otherwise she wouldn't be transferred to a specialist hospital, even though she has declined to actually name this hospital. And as you say, there is no evidence in Perth. And, you know, you're Australian. I think Perth is the most remote city in Australia. So if she's not being seen in Perth, I don't know where she would be being seen within, you know, several hours of that hospital, I would imagine. So it's all very curious, and it must undoubtedly raise questions as to the veracity of that original photo, which could or could not be. I mean, I'm not a psychic. I don't know whether it's true or not, but certainly this does raise some serious questions.
Yeah, you're right, because just going to that Instagram post, Alex Phillips, she said, "I've gone into kidney renal failure. They've given me 4 days to live, transferring me to a specialist hospital in urology. I'm ready to go, just not until I see my babies one last time." It feels like there's something else going on here.
It's very, very weird. First of all, and we don't know the truth, do we? Perhaps this woman is lying in bed in a hospital and in all sorts of trouble and hasn't got long left on her, clock. We'll soon find out actually whether it's a load of BS, won't we, if she lives to tell, to change her story. But what's weird is, you've had a car accident and it's ended up with kidney failure. Okay, strange. Then you're lying in hospital with what looks like mud or dirt on your face, but no sort of signs of lacerations. I don't understand why her face is dirty, having driven a car. Is that supposed to be bruising? I don't know. If she had kidney failure, you'd expect her to be wired up to some sort of dialysis machine. And I don't know how one gets a kidney failure from a car accident. It's all weird. It's all very, very very weird. And also, if you were told you have 3 days to live, it's a weird post to write, you know, like, this year started off really badly. Oh, well, I got divorced. Oh, well, I don't get to see my kids. Then guess what? Well, I got in a car crash. Now I'm going to die. Thank you all for being wonderful people in my life. It's just odd. Nothing about this seems to make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't pass the sniff test. And as a result, I mean, look, let's see if we can find out the truth, because if this is a genuine story, it should be very easy to prove. There'll be more photographs.
But that's what the Australian journalists have been trying to do, because as Rafe says, it's not like there are loads of hospitals in Perth. And
it then sort of suggests if this has been made up, and made up to the extent that she's, I don't know, daubed makeup on her face or used AI to make a photo and put that sensational story on Instagram, it suggests she's got some sort of psychological problem, doesn't it? What's the psychological problem called when people sort of imagine their kids are really ill and things like that? You know, it's sort of like hypochondria, but it's not. It's, you know, it really does cast an interesting light on this woman. If she's gone as far as making up that she's pretending she's about to die from a fake car accident, then she's balmy, isn't she? And that should actually unravel all of her accusations.
Yeah, well, look, the police say there was a car accident, but it was a minor accident. And certainly there were no injuries reported. And Lady Victoria Harvey, Rafe, has written, and some people will think this is tough, but Lady V has been on Virginia for a very long time. She's written karma over that selfie, adding on her Instagram the mocking soundtrack of the 1986 hit The Final Countdown. Now, she's not actually talking about the final countdown to her death. She's talking about the final countdown to Virginia Giuffre being exposed. And I think it is worth just speaking for one moment, Rafe, about the fact that even though the entire mainstream media and the establishment and even the royal family itself, let's be honest, have absolutely cast out Prince Andrew and assumed there is no way back, that is not how Prince Andrew feels. That is not how Prince Andrew's allies feel. They believe, Rafe, that he has been subjected to a great injustice and that there is a path back, and they've just needed to wait for a moment like this to prove it. And personally, I've been very honest about this because I like being transparent when I think I've been wrong about something. And I do think I was wrong about Prince Andrew. I think I very much bought into the mainstream media hysteria. And I think he made huge mistakes, by the way, about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not questioning that for 1 second. But I don't think the story adds up.
Yeah, well, firstly, sorry, I said you were Australian. I obviously know you're from New Zealand and now proudly.
Yes, I didn't pick you up on that. I'm not one of those New Zealanders that gets really angry about that. Actually,
having lived in Canada,
I've got relatives in Sydney and I spend a lot of time there. So no, I wasn't offended at all.
And and it's Munchausen syndrome is where you fake illnesses and so forth. That may be the case.
Yes.
Maybe she's short on money and there's a lawsuit to be had for claiming injury in an accident. There are all sorts of possibilities. We simply don't know on that front. But on your other point regarding Prince Andrew, look, you're absolutely right. Prince Andrew has been judged guilty in the eyes of the public, but not guilty in a court of law. And that's crucially important. My point has always been, I have no idea what happened between Victoria Roberts, as she then was, and the Duke of York. I've got no idea. But of course, being found guilty in the public eyes is all that matters for an institution like the monarchy that depends upon the public for its survival. And just as my argument has always been, just as Prince Andrew was willing to sacrifice his life as a brave helicopter pilot in the Falklands War, this has called for another time where you put Queen or King and country before yourself. And he needed to retire and go into the wilderness for the sake of the monarchy. That was necessary at the time. That doesn't mean he was guilty of anything, but there comes the point where you have to realize I'm causing the institution that I love and that's so fundamental to the nation more damage by being there. Now, if we then find out through whatever means that this photograph was fake or this current one is fake and that causes doubts, who knows what path may be open for the Duke to be rehabilitated and come back. Personally, I think it's perhaps too late, but time is a great healer, and who knows?
Well, you two are an absolute fabulous superstar panel. Thank you so much to my dream team, Alex Phillips of the That's What She Said Substack, and Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, historian, royal commentator, and a senior fellow at the brilliant New Culture Forum. Thank you both so much. Really, really appreciate it. And so much comment coming in from you today. My Critic 69 writes, I work in cybersecurity. Oh, so this is the whole issue of Reform UK and bots, etc., etc. And they say, I work in cybersecurity. The only way they would know they were bots if the social media companies released the IP addresses of those that posted. I doubt they can do that without a court order. And Alex writes, and this is on the issue of grooming gangs, the establishment, or I actually call them Pakistani rape gangs, the establishment needs to be uprooted, root and stem. The whole thing needs to be replaced and tried in court. I demand long prison sentences for the many people involved in covering them up. And on Harry and Meghan, Jenny Chilton writes, Buckingham Palace continues to have them on the official royal website and provides a link to the Sussex website, which collects your data and sells it. I mean, I think that's a huge concern. They should not be on the official royal website, and they certainly shouldn't be linking to what is effectively a commercial operation now. Let's get to Greatest Britain Union Jackass, though. The nominees from you today, nominated by Alan James O'Brien for saying it's unthinkable that Kemi Badenoch hasn't watched the fictional Netflix drama Adolescence. Mike Tapp, nominated by Tom John 1975 for humiliating himself after making misleading comments about Nigel Farage. And Christopher Hope, the political editor of GB News, nominated by Whitehorse for not covering the Rupert Lowe rape gang inquiry fundraiser. So this is an interesting one with 18% of the vote. It is Mike Tapp for his Farage smears with 29%. Christopher Hope over Rupert Lowe. But today's Union Jackass, James O'Brien for his faux outrage over Kemi Badenoch and Netflix. I'm told, actually, I didn't listen to him today. I couldn't bring myself, but I am told he was making some absolutely outrageous claims on air today about Kemi Badenoch. And our Greatest Britain, nominated by Darren Donaldson, is Robert Jenrick, because the two-tier justice guidelines have been suspended. Now, coming up in the uncancelled after show on Substack, much more royal news because there's so much going on today with Angela Levin. We're going to bring you this big revelation from Piers Morgan about how Prince Harry went ballistic over his friendship with the royal family. It's caused serious dramas. So we'll hear from Piers at www.outspoken.live. That is where you sign up to my Substack. I'd really appreciate if you could do it. www.substack.live. But we are back live tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. Most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you, but I hope to see you on the after show on Substack in just 1 minute.